So I'd like to recognize Mr. Sablan now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I'd like to submit additional questions for Mr. Pula because I do have lots of questions. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your timing for this hearing is actually perfect. The President promised a $1 trillion infrastructure program in his address to Congress last week. Now our job is to make sure that the U.S. insular areas and Indian countries, the tribal communities, participate fully in the President's plans. Insular and tribal people are among the nation's poorest, and the key to raising standards of living and developing our economies is first-rate infrastructure. Today's hearing can establish a strong record for what our infrastructure needs are, so that when the President's proposal is legislated, this subcommittee will be able to advocate for the islands and the tribes. For that reason, I would like to request, Mr. Chairman, that the record remain open until my governor, Ralph Torres, has had sufficient time to submit his testimony. Notice for this hearing was short. The governor wants his response to be substantive and to reflect the real complexities of the infrastructure needs. So he was not able to provide his views to us today, but he promised that he would do it as soon as possible. Yes. I need a without objection.
Yeah, I understand. So pursuant to committee rules, you're allowed up to 10 days for...
We'll try and get it in 10 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The $27.72 million CIP program that Mr. Pula spoke of originated in the covenant agreement that brought the Northern Marianas Islands and the United States into political union. The funds were meant to help the Marianas, I quote, achieve a progressively higher standard of living and to develop the economic resources needed to meet the financial responsibilities of local self-government, end of quote. And the money has been instrumental to that economic growth of our islands, and we're very grateful to the American taxpayers for that. However, over time, the money was diverted so that now in fiscal year 2016, the Marianas receive only $9 million, less than 1/3 of what we agreed to in the covenant, less than 1/3 of what was promised to the Northern Marianas. The diversion occurred before the Northern Marianas was represented in Congress. Now I think it is time to reevaluate where that money is going and for what Congress, and for Congress to have a role in deciding. So, Nick, Mr. Pula, the 10 criteria OIA uses to divide up the Marianas Covenant funds all have to do with financial management and grant reporting. And I appreciate very much the importance of fiscal responsibility, but according to EPA, the main island in the Marianas, Saipan, is the only United States municipality without 24-hour running water available to residents. To me, that is a serious public health concern. So don't you think, with a yes or no answer, that it's time for us to develop new criteria so that public health and safety needs are prioritized, or at least considered when funds are distributed?
Yes or no?
Please, I don't have too much time, Nick. Yes or no?
As I mentioned, every 5 years we do that, but based on your question, the Office of Insular Affairs will take that into consideration.
I appreciate that. That's a yes?
That's a yes.
Okay, how about the amount of money, Mr. Pula? The $27.72 million Marianas Covenant grant was set up in 1978, nearly 40 years ago. Do you think this annual amount is adequate to address the infrastructure needs of today?
Well, as I mentioned before, Congressman, the needs are a lot more than the money that we
So that's a no. Thank you. What would that $27.72 million be today if we adjusted for inflation?
If we adjusted for inflation, that would be approximately around $42 million.